We live in an absolutely crazy world, and there is no shortage of destructive leadership examples out there in the world. In fact, you've probably already got an image in your mind right now of some politician or some CEO who is so corrupt and so greedy that they abuse their power to put their own interests ahead of the welfare of the people that they should be serving. Now, the interesting thing is that although each of us has a different idea of who a destructive leader is, we all tend to make one common mistake, myself included. That is, we tend to overemphasize the importance of the destructive leader themselves without realizing destructive leadership does not exist in a vacuum. Rather, there are three distinct factors that all work together to empower the destructive leader and their rise to power. Hey everyone, welcome back. I'm the Part-Time Economist, and in today's video, we're going to be looking at a 2007 article from Hogan and Kaiser that talks about the toxic triangle of destructive leadership. With all of the crazy things going on in the world right now, with all of the examples of terrible leadership, I think it's important for us to understand it, not just what a destructive leader is, but what factors enable them, what factors facilitate this destructive leader putting their twisted version of reality into practice and making the scenario worse for everyone, right? So with that being said, let's go ahead and jump right into the video. All right, so the first thing that we've got to talk about with destructive leadership is obviously the destructive leader, but this isn't as simple as it sounds because we need to understand what's the difference between a destructive leader and your run-of-the-mill generic bully or all-around bad guy, right? The difference is that destructive leaders need followers, right? That's inherent in the definition of the word leader. But that also brings up a really interesting paradox. Many of the strategies, many of the tools of the destructive leader are also used by effective leaders. So if you think about charisma, no one wants to follow a boring bump-on-the-log leader who doesn't inspire them. Now, typically, leaders use charisma, communication, to get people to work for the success of an organization or to convince them to donate to charity or go out there and volunteer to help the poor, right? But destructive leaders take many of these same tools, right? Charisma, communication, but they turn it towards a different goal. On top of that, destructive leaders have personal power. Again, this is in common with good leaders, right? People that do the right thing. The difference is that destructive leaders feel that they have the right. They feel that they are justified in using this power to trample the rights of others, right? So it's not enough for them to just have followers and have power. They're going to abuse that power for their own self-interest. Another interesting thing about this article is that destructive leaders aren't just driven by a desire to elevate their own self-interest, right? It's not enough for them to have all the money or all the real estate or to be number one at whatever they're going for. They are also driven by an ideology of hate. In other words, for them to feel fulfilled, they have to actively oppress other people, right? Now, I know this can be kind of hard to think about in a abstract, theoretical way. So I'm going to go with an example here, and keep in mind, this is an example. I'm not accusing or implicating any person, group, or individual here. Let's think about a destructive leader, right? In my mind, it's easy to think about this in terms of a politician or a CEO, right? Some CEO who says, look, I want to be the richest CEO in the world. I don't care if I sell a product that I know is going to hurt people, right? I don't care if I sell a product that requires me to destroy natural resources, right? Or on the flip side, if we think about a politician, this politician might not care if they use their political office to give contracts to companies that they own, right? That would be an example of a destructive leader. But leaders, as we said, they need followers. And the second component of the toxic triangle is having susceptible followers. If you have people that don't buy in to this agenda, the leader isn't going to get very far. So they need followers. And there's two categories of followers here. The first is the conformers. These are the people, they don't really buy into this whole agenda, right? They might even dislike the destructive leader. These are the people that are just doing their job, right? They are driven by fear. They worry that if they do not go along with the agenda, bad things will happen to them, right? So perhaps their characteristics include having unmet needs, maybe a low core self-evaluation, self-esteem you could call it, or a low maturity level when it comes to their morality and ethical reasoning, right? So again, to give you an example, if we're thinking about a corrupt politician or a corrupt manager at the office, let's just go with that. The conformers, these are going to be the people that they see the boss making an employee uncomfortable. These are going to be the people that don't speak up, that don't say anything because they're worried about what happens to them, right? Now on the flip side, the colluders, these are the people, they are bought into this agenda of the destructive leader. They are not driven by fear of what will happen to them if they don't participate. They are driven by ambition, this desire to share a similar worldview with the destructive leader, right? They perhaps share the same corrupt values. They want to support the destructive leader because their goals, they are the same. They have the same objective. So again, if we're looking at a political context, right, you have the destructive leader. He wants, or she wants to get into power and give these contracts to their company. Or maybe they want to get into power and start a war or get into power and do whatever, right? The colluders are going to be the people that are out there on the street harassing the opposing party, trying to rig the ballot boxes, right? Using threats of violence and intimidation, right? To kind of coerce people either to supporting the destructive leader or at least to not oppose him, right? These are the foot soldiers, right? These are the henchmen, if you will, for the destructive leader. But even with these two factors, our systems are typically designed to resist these abuses of power, right? We have checks and balances. We have things like that. So the third component of the toxic triangle of destructive leadership is a conducive environment. And the first two really go together, which is instability and a perceived threat. So when things are unstable, right? When there's a lot of change going on, it's easier for the destructive leader to come in and fill that void, right? People aren't sure what the policy is. People aren't sure what the regulation should be. So it's easy for a destructive leader who is charismatic and powerful to come in and kind of push the boundaries, so to speak, right? On top of that, when there is a threat, people want action, right? Just do something. How many times have you heard that? Just do something. Just fix it, right? This isn't the time for talking. This is the time for action. Now, the interesting thing here is that this perceived threat could be something real, right? There could be a disease going across the country, or there could be a bad economy, or the threat could be completely imagined, right? It could be something that the destructive leader is kind of just putting out there to scare people into giving them more power, right? On top of that, destructive leaders can twist cultural values to their own agenda. So I want to give you an example of this. Let's think about cultures, right? Some cultures are very individualistic. They're all about freedom and doing your own thing, right? The destructive leader can say, look, we know this is a cultural value. XYZ group of people are trying to take your freedom, so we must oppress them, right? On the flip side, let's suppose we have a cultural value of harmony, of working together, right? Traditionally, we would think of this as a good thing. But again, the destructive leader doesn't care what the cultural value is. They will find a way to twist it to their own thing, right? So they'll say, yes, uniformity is important. Therefore, no dissent whatsoever is allowed, right? Harmony is important. Therefore, you cannot criticize me under any circumstances, right? So regardless of what that cultural value is, the destructive leader can turn it to their advantage. And the last one is checks and balances, lack of checks and balances, I should say, and ineffective institutions. Now, this is a huge one, right? Let's suppose, again, we have a politician, right? They have been convicted of minor things in the past, right? And they weren't really held accountable, right? They were emboldened by the failure of the system to prevent them from running again for office, right? Or if we think about it in an employment context, right? This is the person that's always making these inappropriate jokes or saying things that they shouldn't, and HR never does anything about it, right? They're not holding people accountable. So when you put these three things together, you get the triangle of toxic leadership, right? So you've got this destructive leader. You've got this person that wants power, that wants to force their agenda upon society, right? You have their followers, right? The people that are either actively supporting them or the people that don't speak up, the people that feel intimidated and are kind of just going along with it. And then lastly, you have the failure of these checks and balances, right? The kind of erosion of these traditional safeguards that enables the destructive leader to get in there and do things what they want. And obviously, I've tried to make this video as objective as possible. I've tried to make it to where I'm not like pointing anything out or accusing any specific person, but I think you could easily apply this to situations in your own life, right? Whether it's a political situation you've seen on TV or whether it's workplace dynamics, right? If you look hard enough at a corrupt, destructive leader, I think you're going to find all of these three components, right? You're going to find the leader, obviously. You're going to find people that supported them. And then you're also going to find institutions that didn't hold them accountable, that didn't prevent them from doing these things they want to do. So again, I am sharing my interpretation here of the article. If you want the word for word summary, I would recommend reading the original article itself. But I did find the article helpful. I hope this video was useful to you, and I would love to know your thoughts in the comments down below. I appreciate you watching, and I'll see you next time.